Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The steakhouse was the kind of place where every table had a private light, where the wine glasses had stems like swan necks, and the waiters moved in silence, like shadows in tuxedos. I had eaten here before, but never like this. This time, it was my name on the reservation, my signature on the corporate card, my title on the email that went out to the firm, Claire Morgan, partner at Lang, Hart, and Feldman LLP. First woman in the firm's 80-year history to make partner under the age of 40, and frankly, the only one who had brought in 3 high-profile wins back-to-back in less than 2 years. I should have been floating. Instead, I was checking my watch every 2 minutes, forcing smiles at my colleagues, and sipping a glass of overpriced Cabernet like it might sedate the knot in my stomach. Because they were late. They meaning my parents. And Nathan. Of course, Nathan. Victor Lang sat at the head of the long table, calm and precise in every motion. The man looked like he had been carved out of patience and old money. He had the kind of quiet charisma that made people lean in just to hear him breathe. His wife, Elaine, sat beside him, glowing with that same quiet wealth. On the opposite end of the table sat me, feeling like the 16-year-old version of myself again, bracing for my father's judgment while dressed in a $3,000 suit I had bought for this exact night. I was mid-sentence, joking with one of the senior partners about that one client who insisted every contract had to be printed in Comic Sans, when I saw them walk in. George, my father, in a stiff navy blazer and the same expression he wore to my high school graduation, like someone dragged him there at gunpoint. My mother, Linda, in pearls and tension. And Nathan, perfectly groomed, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, charming the entire left side of the table before even looking my way. They sat down without so much as a congratulations. My mother smiled like she was trying not to sweat. Nathan patted my shoulder and said, "Big night, huh, like I just won a chili cook-off instead of rewriting firm history." Then came the first course, filet mignon, blood rare, just how Victor liked it, and with it, the wine. The waiter filled our glasses, and the room quieted naturally, like the air itself knew something was about to happen. My father stood up slowly. He cleared his throat, lifted his glass, and smiled that tight, cold smile I knew too well. "Well," he said, "tonight we're celebrating hard work, dedication, and success." And I can't help but think back to when Nathan won his first science fair in 6th grade. "Remember that, son? You made that solar panel from scratch. We all knew then you were going places." He chuckled, raised his glass higher, and said, "To Nathan, the smart one in the family." There was a beat of stunned silence, not long, just long enough for me to feel every heartbeat in my chest like a drum solo. A few people at the table laughed, awkwardly. My hands stayed perfectly still. My jaw didn't move. I'd trained for this moment like an athlete. I was unshakable. But something behind my left eye twitched. And I felt it, that fire I thought I'd buried years ago. The one his voice always lit. Victor Lang stood. He didn't look at me, didn't even glance my way. Just lifted his glass slowly, like he was about to pronounce judgment. "Interesting," he said, in a voice that could slice marble. "Because she just became my partner." The room went so quiet, I could hear the ice settling in the water glasses. My father blinked. Once, then twice. Nathan's smile faltered. My mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Nobody said a thing. The silence? God, it tasted better than the filet. Victor sat back down like he hadn't just dropped a nuclear warhead into the middle of dinner. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just the tiniest curve of satisfaction, like I was letting the moment rest on my tongue before swallowing it whole. That silence stretched, long and heavy. Nobody made a toast after that. Nobody dared. Dessert came and went. People talked, but not to me. Or to him. And still, I wasn't surprised. Not really. Because a week ago, in the guest bedroom of my apartment, I found something in Nathan's briefcase. Something that explained everything. Something that told me the sabotage hadn't just been emotional or accidental. It was strategic. It was calculated. And it had been going on a lot longer than I thought. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Because revenge, when served cold, is good. But when served at your own victory dinner, that shit is gourmet. It happened on a rainy Wednesday, the kind of day where the city smelled like wet pavement and the coffee tasted burnt no matter how fresh the pot was. Nathan had texted me out of the blue that morning, asking if he could swing by and catch up before flying back to DC for a deposition. I hadn't seen him in weeks, maybe months, not since the holidays where he spent most of dinner explaining blockchain to my mother like she hadn't raised 2 kids and worked 40 years in accounting. Still, I said yes. I always said yes to Nathan. He showed up carrying a designer briefcase, a smug grin, and a 6-pack of some craft beer he knew I hated, but claimed he thought I might be into now. We sat in my apartment, him on the edge of the sofa like he couldn't quite relax, me curled up in the armchair I'd bought with my first bonus check. He talked about his job, the clients he couldn't name, the insane hours, the insider headaches, and how exhausting it is being indispensable. I smiled through it all. That trained, perfect smile women like me master early, a smile that stretches, but doesn't quite reach the eyes. He left after an hour. Said he had to run to a dinner meeting, probably with some potential partner who would conveniently be male and golfing before noon every Sunday. I offered to walk him out, but he waved me off, said he'd forgotten his umbrella in the Uber anyway. When the door closed behind him, I noticed he'd left his briefcase by the coat rack. Typical Nathan, the man never finished what he started if it didn't end with applause. Now, I'll admit it. I shouldn't have opened it. I should have called him. Texted. Waited. But something about the way he'd talked, that slippery tone that always felt like he was keeping score, had scratched at me all evening. And I was tired of wondering if I was being paranoid or just finally paying attention. So, yeah, I popped the latch. Inside were the usual things: legal pads, noise-canceling headphones, a half-eaten protein bar, a Mont Blanc pen I swear he stole from our dad. But beneath it all, tucked into a manila folder, were printed memos and email chains. My firm's letterhead. My team's internal correspondence. Notes from a confidential merger deal I'd been leading for the last 6 months. Not redacted. Not anonymized. Just sitting there, like he'd picked them up off my desk himself. I felt my pulse drop. Not speed up, drop, like a stone in cold water. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Nathan worked at Weiler and Tate, one of our biggest competitors, especially in corporate mergers. And this particular deal, a messy, high-stakes acquisition between 2 telecom giants, had been plagued by bizarre delays, inexplicable leaks, and sudden interest from outside firms that shouldn't have even known about the talks. Now I knew why. Nathan had been feeding intel to the other side, quietly, strategically, like the charming little parasite he was. I didn't call him. I didn't even move. I sat on the couch for an hour staring at the papers like they might start talking. Then I put everything back exactly how I found it and placed the briefcase beside the door. When he came back later, rushing in with a breathless apology and an inside joke about old age, making him forgetful, I laughed like I always did. Smiled like I always did. But something inside me had shifted. Over the next few days, I started leaking information, but not the real kind. I drafted fake memos, invented internal strategies, created a ghost budget for a marketing rollout that didn't exist. I made sure it all looked legitimate, down to the email signatures. Then I left the documents in places where only someone who thought they were being sneaky would find them. And sure enough, 2 days later, our opposing counsel referenced one of those fake projections during a negotiation call. That's when I knew. He was using me, and he thought I was too blind or too stupid to notice. The only thing worse than being betrayed by someone you trusted is realizing they never thought you'd be sharp enough to catch them in the first place. While all this was unraveling, I still had my promotion in sight. It was days away. I hadn't told anyone yet, not my team, not even my assistant, because I didn't want to jinx it. But I let it slip to my parents during a call, hoping for something. My father's response? Titles mean nothing if no one respects you. Not congratulations. Not you've earned it. Just that. Like the universe owed him some return on investment he never actually made. I had worked on this deal for over 11 years, since 2015. Every late night, every closed-door meeting, every 30-hour week bled into the next until my calendar just looked like a crime scene. I don't say that for pity. I say that because I bled for this. And the people closest to me were busy handing my veins to the enemy. That night, as I was sipping stale office coffee and pretending to revise an NDA that didn't need revising, I got the email. No name, no signature. Just 6 words that made my spine stiffen like a plank. Someone's trying to block your promotion. The sender was internal. And the call? It was coming from inside the firm. There are some memories that don't fade so much as they calcify. They harden inside you, become part of your posture, your breath, the way your shoulders lift when someone raises their voice, or the way you apologize for things that were never your fault. For me, those memories were my father's face. George Morgan, retired Marine, corporate security consultant, and full-time mythmaker. He didn't just believe in strength, he demanded it. And not the nuanced, compassionate kind, either. He believed in silence over emotion, grit over grace, obedience over questioning, and boys over girls. Especially his boy. Nathan had been his crown jewel from the moment he came out looking like a Norman Rockwell painting. Blonde, blue-eyed, naturally athletic, quick with numbers, and quicker with lies. He was the kid who didn't just win, he expected it. I remember one Thanksgiving, Nathan got a C on a history quiz, and my dad blamed the teacher's agenda for trying to rewrite the founding fathers. When I brought home a B- in chemistry the same year, he asked me why I couldn't focus instead of crying like some damn overreacting teenager. I was 14. That phrase, too emotional for leadership, it's branded into the inside of my skull. He used it often, like some kind of evaluation metric he believed in more than birthdays or affection. I remember once, in high school, I ran for class president and lost by 8 votes. My dad didn't ask how I felt or even if I tried hard. He just said, well, now you know not to waste time on something you can't win. Nathan, meanwhile, had won prom prince, and my father gave a 5-minute speech at the dinner table like Nathan had just solved foreign policy. The irony now, looking back, is that Nathan was never built to carry the weight our father tried to give him. He was good at pretending, exceptional at it, even, but at his core, Nathan was hollow. A well-dressed shell with just enough charm to keep people from knocking. He played the part because it got him through doors, but once inside, he didn't build anything. He just sat in the room and smiled while people assumed he belonged there. That memory, the quiet ache of being second place in your own house, was what fueled me when I crafted the next move. It was surgical. I scheduled a confidential deal review with my team and circulated a preliminary draft of a revised NDA, which included a completely fabricated clause about exclusivity windows and stakeholder disclosures. Nothing explosive. Just enough bait to see who bit. Then I leaked it, not obviously, not sloppily, just tucked it into a group thread that included my assistant and 2 senior associates. The kind of thread where details got skimmed but not ignored. Sure enough, 3 days later, Victor Lang called me into his office with that cool look he reserved for things that pissed him off but required diplomacy. He didn't accuse me of anything directly, just asked why our competitors had reference language from an internal document that had never been formally distributed. I told him I had a theory and that I'd get back to him. Then I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside? A printed copy of the email that had made its way, verbatim, into a negotiation summary, one traced to a Wi-Fi address that matched Nathan's home office. Victor didn't say much. He nodded once, like something in the back of his mind had just clicked into place. He didn't ask how I knew. He didn't ask how long I'd suspected. He just said, interesting, and told me to close the door on my way out. I should have felt victorious in that moment, like I'd finally proven I wasn't just some overachieving little sister clawing for credibility. But something still didn't sit right. And I found out why about 2 hours later when my assistant, Mia, loyal, detail-obsessed Mia, asked if she could talk to me in private. We stepped into the hallway. She looked like she might throw up. Then she said, "Your father called the office last week." I blinked. What? He asked for Victor directly. Said he was concerned about your emotional stability. Said he didn't think you were cut out for the partner role, that the pressure might break you. My mouth went dry. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak for a full minute. I just stood there, hearing that phrase again, too emotional for leadership, but now, weaponized like a bullet in a boardroom. It's one thing to be underestimated. It's another to be actively undermined by the man who helped raise you. And the worst part? It wasn't even surprising. That was the part that made it hurt. It felt like gravity, brutal, but expected. I thanked Mia, promised her discretion, and returned to my office with my spine straight and my jaw locked. I sat at my desk and opened a fresh Word doc. No more waiting. No more pretending. It was time to write the speech for the promotion dinner. The one they thought would just be polite gratitude and champagne fluff. I titled the file, "Let Them Choke on It." And then I called Victor and asked one simple question. "Mind if I bring a surprise guest to the dinner?" He paused, then said, "Depends. Will it make the food taste better?" I smiled, this time with teeth. "Oh, it's going to make everything taste better." It was early morning when I called my mother, too early for small talk or polite introductions. And I think that was intentional on my part because I didn't want to give her the chance to rehearse whatever excuse she'd been crafting since Mia told me about the phone call. She picked up on the second ring, voice sleepy and already tinged with guilt, like somewhere in her bones she knew what was coming. I didn't waste time. I asked her directly, flatly, like I was reading off a legal brief. "Did you know Dad called my office last week?" There was a pause, thick with that awful static silence that comes when someone wants to lie, but knows they're already caught. She sighed before she spoke, and that's I said everything. "He didn't mean it to hurt you, Claire. He thinks Nathan needs this more than you do." I closed my eyes and gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "More than me?" I repeated, not shouting, not whispering, just repeating the words back to her like maybe I'd heard them wrong through the receiver. But I hadn't. And she didn't correct herself. She just said, "He's struggling, Claire. You've always landed on your feet." That was the moment it hit me. Not the betrayal. I already knew about that, but the calmness with which they had done it. The complete ease with which my own parents had decided that my success was expendable if it meant preserving Nathan's ego. They hadn't even framed it as betrayal. To them, it was logic. The cost of keeping the golden boy polished. I didn't argue with her. I didn't cry or plead or yell. I thanked her, wished her a good day, and ended the call while her voice was still trying to soften the blow with words like understand and family and it's complicated. Then I stood in the middle of my apartment and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear, crystal clear. And clarity is the most dangerous kind of calm. I spent that day finalizing the guest list. I invited Nathan, of course. My parents, too. I extended formal invites to every senior partner, key stakeholders, and a few of my allies from across departments who had watched me grind it out for the past decade. And then, for good measure, I made sure every single one of them received a printed invite with a tasteful header and the firm logo in gold foil, the kind that couldn't be ignored or conveniently misplaced. Then I made one more move, my final play, my checkmate disguised as discretion. I drafted an email, anonymous in the address, but flawless in its detail, and sent it to the full senior leadership board. Inside, I attached documents, clean, sharp scans of the emails Nathan had leaked, time-stamped and watermarked, along with the records of his involvement at Weiler and Tate. I didn't include any commentary. I didn't need to. The facts were loud enough. That same afternoon, I received confirmation from Victor that the client Nathan had tried to tank, the telecom merger worth over $10 million, had gone through, in large part thanks to the fake projections I had leaked as bait. They'd adjusted course based on my accidental information and ended up agreeing to a deal even better than our original terms. Victor's email was short but pointed. "Congrats. You saved the firm a year's worth of headaches and reminded me why I bet on you." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I was excited in the most dangerous, simmering kind of way. Revenge, when it's petty, leaves a bitter taste. But this? This was crafted. This was measured. This was the slow turning of a knife in the dark. I woke up before the sun, got dressed in a deep navy suit with a blood-red blouse underneath, a silent tribute to the years of swallowed rage and buried disappointment, and walked into the office with my head high and my plan set. The dinner was arranged in a private room at the same steakhouse where we'd entertained clients for decades. The lighting was low, the napkins were starched, and the wine was flowing before half the guests even arrived. People chatted and smiled and toasted casually as if they didn't know the ground under their feet was about to shift. My father walked in first, eyes scanning the room like he was entering a battlefield instead of a dining room. My mother followed, tight-lipped and glossy-eyed, trying too hard to appear neutral. Nathan arrived last, late again, and kissed me on the cheek like we hadn't both been building weapons in the shadows. I greeted them all with warmth, genuine in appearance, sharp as glass underneath. I made my rounds, thanked guests, accepted compliments, nodded politely. The whole time, I kept my speech folded in the inner pocket of my blazer, right over my heart, where it thumped like a drum solo no one else could hear. When dinner ended, Victor stood and gestured for me to say a few words. The room quieted, as it always does when someone's about to be measured. I rose from my seat, reached for my glass, and let the silence settle around me. My father's face was blank, maybe expectant, maybe indifferent. My brother was smirking. My mother looked nervous. I cleared my throat and smiled, not wide, not performative, just enough to draw attention. Then I said, I want to toast the man who said I'd never make it. And just like that, the air in the room changed. I hadn't even started the speech yet. And already, they were choking on the first sip. The air in the room had taken on that peculiar kind of weight you only feel right before something either explodes or disappears, like the pressure inside a storm cloud just before the lightning decides it's had enough of waiting. I didn't need to look around to know all eyes were on me, because I could feel the stillness crawling up my spine, that electric buzz of anticipation when people stop chewing, stop shifting, stop pretending to check their phones, and instead lean just slightly forward, trying not to miss a single word. I held their attention in the palm of my hand, and I let them wait. I want to toast the man who said I'd never make it, I repeated, this time lifting my glass slowly, deliberately, letting the words hang in the air like smoke that refuses to clear. Because in a way, he was right. The path wasn't easy. And it shouldn't have been. But it turns out, the people who tell you you're not enough sometimes give you just enough fuel to prove them wrong every single damn day. I glanced at my father, whose jaw was tight and whose wine glass remained untouched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't spit fire or unleash years of suppressed venom. I spoke like a woman who had already won, because I had. You taught me a lot, I said to him, not with sarcasm, but with a kind of distant clarity that didn't need approval. You taught me that silence is power. That people will only respect you if you make it impossible for them not to. You taught me how to take a punch and keep smiling through it. You taught me that being underestimated is a weapon in the right hands. And, maybe without meaning to, you taught me exactly how to survive in a world built to ignore people like me. There was a flicker behind his eyes, not emotion, not yet, but the beginning of something uncomfortable settling in, a realization beginning to itch beneath his pride. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Good. That was enough. I turned toward the rest of the table and let my eyes scan the room, stopping for just a moment on Nathan, whose grin had finally wilted into something closer to confusion. The merger is complete, I said, my tone shifting to something cleaner, colder. The deal went through at a $10.2 million valuation, securing us not only one of the biggest clients this firm has ever had, but ensuring a 5-year exclusivity clause that guarantees we'll be the only legal team advising their next 3 major tech acquisitions. A few heads nodded, some even clapped softly. I kept going. And while I'd love to take full credit, I have to admit, I had help. That made Nathan blink. He leaned slightly forward, unsure if I was about to offer him a scrap or a sword. I gave him both. The help came from a source very close to me, I said, letting the words linger just long enough. Someone who thought they were smarter. Someone who believed their proximity gave them leverage. Someone who forgot that smiling in my face while holding a knife behind their back doesn't make them clever, it makes them predictable. My eyes locked with his then. No smile, no fury, just a clean, unbroken stare. He knew. And in that moment, I could see it register. The emails, the bait, the trap, the timing, all of it. All of it had been me. Nathan's face flushed, but he said nothing. Not here. Not now. Not in front of this crowd. Victor stood before the silence could get too comfortable. He raised his glass and smiled in that old money way of his, effortless, practiced, sharp around the edges. To Claire, he said, voice carrying through the quiet with absolute precision, who just became the youngest partner in our firm's history, not because someone handed her anything, but because she outworked, outthought, and outplayed everyone, even the ones who should have been in her corner from the start. He didn't look at my father when he said it. He didn't have to. The clinking of glasses echoed like a bell toll across the room. George's hand twitched near his glass, but he didn't lift it. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye with her napkin, pretending not to be crying while simultaneously making it very clear that she was. Nathan sat still, shoulders stiff, lips parted like he wanted to speak, but hadn't yet found the lie that would sound believable. I let them all sit with it. Let them sip their wine and chew their dry-aged regrets while I folded my speech, tucked it neatly into my jacket, and stood without touching my dessert. It was chocolate soufflé, probably the best in the city, but I wasn't hungry anymore. Not for food. I walked out halfway through dessert. No dramatic exit, no parting words. Just the sound of my heels on polished wood and the faint rustle of whispers trailing behind me like the tail of a storm. I didn't look back. Not once. I never spoke to Nathan again. Never returned his calls, never replied to his half-apology email full of excuses and vague regret. I never visited my father after that night. Not for birthdays. Not even when he landed in the hospital the following year with chest pains. My mother still calls, sometimes, tells me he asks about me, tells me he watches the firm's press releases like he's still in the game. I don't respond. Not out of hate, that part burned out a long time ago, but because some doors, once shut, should stay that way. Revenge, I've learned, doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it's just the absence of permission. The quiet refusal to allow someone back into the life they tried to break. And sometimes silence, real silence, is louder than any scream you could muster. But if I'm honest, truly honest, I'll admit this. Some nights, when the city is quiet and the weight of victory starts to feel as hollow as the fight once did, I wonder if he really meant it. If, deep down, he actually believed Nathan was the smart one. Or if he just couldn't bear the thought of being wrong about me. Maybe that's the part that still haunts me, not the betrayal, not the sabotage, not even the years of being unseen. It's the not knowing. The fact that the man who raised me may have never really seen me at all. And maybe, just maybe, he still doesn't.